What happens when a government's secrets are exposed and the press refuses to stay silent? In the summer of 1971, the United States faced one of its greatest legal and political reckonings. At the center of it all was a 7,000-page leak that stunned the nation, a whistleblower willing to risk everything, and a Supreme Court case that would shape the future of press freedom. This is the true story of how the Pentagon Papers changed everything. It all began with Daniel Ellsberg, a former military analyst who had once supported U.S. involvement in Vietnam. But as he pored over classified documents during his work for the Rand Corporation, what he discovered disturbed him deeply. Hidden from the public were years of deception, lies told by successive American presidents about the scale, purpose, and likelihood of success in the Vietnam War. This top-secret report, titled Report of the Office of the Secretary of Defense Vietnam Task Force, laid bare a stunning reality. The American public had been misled for decades. U.S. presidents from Truman to Nixon had escalated military involvement, even while privately doubting the mission. Covert bombings in Laos and Cambodia. Secret operations, a war strategy that contradicted every public assurance made. For Ellsberg, silence was no longer an option. In June 1971, he leaked the documents to the New York Times, believing that the truth had to be known. The Times published the first article with the headline, Vietnam Archive, Pentagon Study Traces 3 Decades of Growing U.S. Involvement. The impact was immediate and explosive. Within days, the Nixon administration took drastic action. Arguing that further publication would threaten national security, the government obtained a court order halting the Times coverage. It was the first time in American history that the federal government had used the courts to impose prior restraint on a newspaper, stopping it from publishing before a story was even printed. But the presses didn't stop. The Washington Post also obtained the documents and prepared to publish. When the government tried to block them too, the legal battle turned into a full-blown constitutional showdown, the press versus the presidency. The stakes couldn't have been higher. On one side stood the First Amendment and the idea that a free press must never be silenced. On the other stood claims that revealing the papers would put American lives and military operations at risk. The Times and the Post argued that the public had a right to know, especially when their government had repeatedly lied. Their attorneys insisted that the First Amendment was absolute when it came to preventing government censorship. The government's lawyers, on the other hand, claimed that national security trumped the media's freedom to publish. The battle raced through the courts. In just weeks, the case landed before the U.S. Supreme Court on an emergency basis. The nation waited for a decision that would define the future of transparency, accountability, and press freedom. On June 30th, 1971, the court delivered its verdict, a 6-3 ruling in favor of the newspapers. The majority opinion was brief but powerful. Any system of prior restraints of expression comes to this court bearing a heavy presumption against its constitutional validity. The government thus carries a heavy burden of showing justification for the imposition of such a restraint. And the government had failed to meet that burden. Justice Hugo Black didn't mince words in his opinion. The press was to serve the governed, not the governors, he wrote. The government's power to censor the press was abolished, so that the press would remain forever free to censure the government. The dissenting justices did not deny the importance of press freedom. Rather, they expressed concern over the speed of the judicial process and the complexity of the national security implications. Still, the majority ruling stood firm. The First Amendment protected the right of the press to publish the Pentagon Papers. The aftermath was just as dramatic. Although Daniel Ellsberg was charged under the Espionage Act of 1917, his case collapsed after it was revealed that the Nixon administration had illegally wiretapped him and orchestrated a break-in at his psychiatrist's office. The charges were dropped. Public opinion turned sharply against the Nixon administration. The Pentagon Papers confirmed what many had feared. The government had knowingly deceived its own citizens. This crisis of trust set the stage for deeper investigations into executive abuse of power, investigations that would soon uncover the Watergate scandal and ultimately force Nixon's resignation. The legacy of the Pentagon Papers goes far beyond Vietnam. It inspired generations of journalists to hold power to account. It emboldened whistleblowers. And it laid down a legal precedent that still protects the press today. In more recent years, this case has echoed through other high-profile moments: WikiLeaks, Edward Snowden, and ongoing debates about how far the press can go in exposing government secrets. The central principle endures: the government cannot silence the press unless it can prove that publication will cause immediate and irreparable harm. As one legal scholar put it, the principle that the government cannot muzzle the press unless it shows a real and immediate threat is more important than ever. The precedent set in 1971 is the reason why we still have a watchdog press today. In the end, the Pentagon Papers case was not just about documents, it was about democracy. It was a moment when the Constitution was tested and triumphed. The government tried to silence the press. It failed. And because of that, the American people won. If this story inspired you or gave you a deeper appreciation for the power of truth, transparency, and journalism, leave a comment below. And don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe for more in-depth breakdowns of historic moments that changed the USA. Your voice matters. Stay informed, stay curious, and stay free. Thank you for watching. Catch you in the next one.